The number one piece of advice I would give to a business who's considering working with any fractional executive is vet them exactly the same way you would vet a full-time employee,
Mhm.
right? Because the impact may not be as great because you're not taking them on as a full-time W-2, but the damage that they can do or the opportunity cost of time can still be pretty great. Really go into it eyes wide open. Am I vetting the person right for culture? Do they have the right type of experience? Have they been in the right industry and that type of thing? We have a pretty high bar for everybody in our community. So you can be pretty assured that everybody that comes in has a good criteria. But most companies aren't talking to companies like us, right? They're talking just to anybody who says that they're a fractional CMO. So I would say that's the number one failure point that I would recommend against.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. Sitting here with Raj Kapur, founder, CEO of End Marketing, fractional CMO expert. Caught my attention by understanding the utility that individuals can play into organizations, even in shorter windows of time, and really get founders outside of their echo chambers and integrating the most advanced forms of digital marketing that are being used in the space today. So, Raj, thank you for taking the time to join on the pod. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks so much, Jason. Really appreciative of your time and honored that you would invite me.
Of course. And thought we could begin with your background. I know you didn't go to school to become a fractional CMO expert necessarily, and found the need in the marketplace. So want to be able to touch on how everything evolved, but thought we could begin at your beginning and where your career first kicked off.
Sure. So yeah, totally didn't start off things to become a fractional CMO. That's for sure. So I started this business about 7 years ago. So April of 2017, I started the business from nothing. Prior to that, I had about 20 years of mostly big company experience. I actually graduated from undergrad with a biology pre-med degree. So the degrees of freedom from pre-med to a fractional CMO career are quite a few. Basically spent about 20 years in corporate America, went back to business school in the middle there, was a strategy consultant for about 4 years in there, and basically found a huge market opportunity to help smaller businesses adopt digital marketing technologies. Basically, Jason, the same business that you and yours are in. And that's why I originally started the business. Through a few fits and starts, the company grew, hit the pandemic. We kind of had some faltering, a few pivots here and there. About 2 years ago, in earnest, we pivoted our business model to be all about fractional chief marketing officers. What we found in our business is a couple things. One, the business's growth was being hampered by my bandwidth individually. And this, I'm sure this happens to a lot of agency owners and a lot of people like yourself. And what I was realizing, the value of what we were doing was really high, and my own scalability was very difficult. We also realized we weren't calling it fractional CMO. We were basically giving the strategy away for free or for very low cost and really making our money on the execution side, which, as you know, as an agency owner, is very difficult to do, and it's very difficult to scale.
Yes.
And so what we started off was with just a few fractionals that were willing to take on projects that we didn't have the bandwidth to do. Only focus on the strategy, only come in. There's that term fractional CMO that was growing in the marketplace. And that's where we started a couple of years ago with the fractional CMO business. And now it's over 2/3 of our business. It's growing steadily. We have 55 fractional chief marketing officers in our community. We help them get leads, get projects. We also help them with community. We also help them with tools, templates, coaching, and all of those other types of things. So that's where we are, and that's what we're primarily working on these days.
So I find this so interesting. I'm an agency owner. I work with many other agencies, been on panels with agency owners from some of the top growing firms in the country. And what you're speaking to, bandwidth, scalability, quality, when you're trying to expand things, this is a constant part of the discussion, the struggle of an agency owner. And so what you're saying is you found by removing yourself, by focusing your fractional CMOs on the actual strategy, you're getting a better result, a better relationship, and overall longer term engagements because of the value you're providing with fractional CMOs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and you've lived this, so this is more telling you something you already know. But there's an old adage that says, "Strategy without action is the slowest path to victory, Execution without strategy is the noise before defeat. How many times have we taken on projects or have companies out there tried to jump all the way to execution and say, oh, I don't need that strategy stuff. My messaging is good, or this is good, or that. My website's fine. I just want you to execute some ad programs or do some content or write some emails, and I just want it to work, right? And obviously, you've been in this game quite a long time. That never works. Or maybe it does work, but whenever it doesn't work, you can almost always point back to something that happened in the strategy that was incorrect. So what we stopped doing as part of this transformation, and you've probably already made this change, is we wouldn't take on new clients that want to skip the steps. We said, no, you have to stop and do the strategy. We have to do an audit or some sort of an assessment up front so we really understand the business, the foundational fundamentals, which are what? Who is your target audience? What are their needs and wants? What can't they get today? What makes you unique? How do you message that? How do you put it out there digitally? And always starting with that fundamental. So part of that transformation was saying no to the wrong types of things. And when you're early in your business, it's almost impossible to say no. So we had to sort of work that muscle a little bit. But yeah, in a short summary, really isolating, never starting execution work without that strategy in place was a major inflection point for our business.
Sure. We get groups that talk to us, founders, on a daily basis that say, hey, we have all these pieces in place. We have a funnel. All we need is traffic. Can you just launch some ads for us? And we will act as a more of an ad network. We work on a lot of investor focused campaigns. We'll use our investor audiences and drive traffic there, but it's a much smaller percentage of the time that it works. And we're transparent about that. We tell them, you really don't want to skip these steps. We understand it's a small timeline for the raise and some of these initiatives that we're brought to regularly. I'll give them steps towards building their own strategy. We'll do a mini strategy on every campaign where we're talking about the competitors, the audience, the messaging across each channel, the projections, and even doing that, we'll get clients that want to that speed us up and, hey, this is slowing us down. We just want to take something live. I've built a model called the 8-point plan for strategy, written articles about it, lead workshops on it. As much as I recommend it, they only hear the results. They want that 10x return on ad spend or whatever it is. I'm sure that's a constant story for you. So I guess I want to learn more about the steps. I really like focusing on what their needs, what they can't get, the competitive separation. But before that, what are you sharing with founders to explain the importance of strategy? Is it a case study saying, hey, a group that just went to execution or a group that did a balance of strategy execution? Here's the differentiators. How do you get founders to really buy into the extra time, the extra resources that are needed to focus on strategy before taking anything live?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually don't start with case studies. That's in our terminology, that's a little bit lower funnel. I think usually it's a business. Remember, this is a fractional executive, not a full-time executive. So usually the people that I come across already know that they don't have a strategy in place. They may have bad results. They may have just fired. You've heard this too. They may have just fired their third agency in 3 years. They may have just lost their marketing leader. They may realize their internal marketing leader is not very strategic or not very productive or something like that. So they already usually know that they have a pain. And what I say to them is a fractional chief marketing officer gives you the power of a full-time chief marketing officer without the full-time salary. So usually it's educating about the fractional executive, the fractional workforce, rather than trying to go in and say, oh, here's an example of somebody that we drove an amazing result. Now, of course, we do drive amazing results, but it's usually getting their mindset shifted around this. Now, in the world today, I've heard this called, Jason, I've heard this year called the year of the fractional executive, right? We've heard that thing out there, and I'll jump onto that because it helps our business. But really, there's a lot of PR around that term, fractional department, fractional executive, and things like that. And so this idea of I get the full person but part-time, I think roots itself in a confluence of sort of like macroeconomic types of factors. So companies are finally realizing that in order to get the talent that I need, I don't need a full-time workforce. They might have gone to an agency in the past, and now they're realizing the agency can like be my marketing department, if they stretch the agency a little bit, or I can get an executive to be my fractional CMO or fractional CFO. Like there's these fractional executives in every industry at this point, right? So you can almost build a entire team of fractional executives and it'd be quite useful. And I think the reason for it is on the labor force side, the level of talent that was previously in full-time jobs in companies or leading agencies like yours no longer is doing that full time. There's like this huge trend to, I think it's a result of the pandemic. I don't know for sure, but I'm going to guess that it is,
Okay.
where people are tired of full-time jobs. They're tired of being beholden to a company for decades. You know, those promises of the past that we were made in our 20s, Jason, just don't exist anymore, right? Like we might not, if we're at a big company, we've been at a big company for a long time, we may not retire with that company anymore. So I probably talk to a senior executive in the marketing field at least once a week who is about to quit their job, recently been laid off, might get laid off, heard about this fractional thing and is curious whether they want to make the career switch. It's actually very common. And so I think that happening on the labor force side, along with the companies that are becoming more aware of this, that's usually the entry point conversation. It's not about like, oh, I want to go get more leads. It's actually much more comprehensive than that, that a CEO is sitting there saying, I've grown this company or I'm about to grow this company, and there's a gap in my knowledge or my bandwidth that I need help. That's the entry point. That's the primary pain point that I find that I run into much more.
Let's talk about the fractional CMOs for a second. Like you said, they see more opportunity by working as a fractional CMO with multiple organizations versus the traditional 9 to 5, gonna work there till I retire, maybe have a few career changes, but I'm committed as a W-2 employee. They see, hey, there's probably a financial upside to working with multiple groups, and I can have more impact. Instead of just focusing on the same target audience, the same KPIs, key performance indicators, the same goals, I can actually show growth across multiple organizations at once. Then you have the company, and maybe they just let go somebody, they see them missing, whether it's internal staff, whether it's the results, and they want to bring in that expertise. They want to bring in those extra pieces of strategy and the overall funnel to get them to their goals. And they say, hey, we can do this at a lower budget. We want to work with the fractional. What makes the decision clear? You have a founder, CEO talking to multiple fractional CMOs.
Yeah.
Do they interview 3? Do they interview 30? Is it a short process? Is it several months? What does that
Great question. Great
dynamic
question.
look like?
Let me unpack what you said to make sure that I answer your question. So at the end of the day, let me start with where you ended, and I'll work my way backwards. So the company, the thing that gets them to say yes is that they are able to access a talent level that they perceive will make a meaningful impact on their business that they couldn't get access to before.
Okay.
Right? So the process by which we go about that may be different than others, but what we do is we get an understanding of what the business is trying to do, what the marketing department is, and what they might be looking for in a fractional CMO. And usually it's some combination of 3 things that they're looking for. Number 1 is I want somebody that has some industry relevance of what I am trying to do or where my business is. So it might be the right industry expertise. Number 2, it's the company stage. So company stage could be I'm a startup, I'm going from 0 to 1, or I'm going from 1 to 100, or I'm a middle market company that's looking to grow and scale because I've hit a growth plateau. So I need somebody who's been either my industry, my company, or it's somebody that like might be in the city that I'm looking for, right? Sometimes the business's locale is extremely important. And it's usually in that order, right? So they'll say, I want somebody that's in the consumer packaged goods industry or the fintech industry or healthcare or whatever that industry alignment is. And it's the thing that gets them to say yes is, oh, this person's been there, done that. They have 3 examples of having grown a business just like mine in my similar stage. Now work backwards to the labor force. Everything you said is absolutely right, but I would actually reorder what the labor force is looking for.
Okay.
It's not actually income. Even though you can make more money by being a fractional, more than anything, people are looking for fulfillment and they're looking for flexibility. And so now think back pre-pandemic, it was probably money was number one. But what did it do? That's why I said it earlier, like, right? So it's going to reset people's priorities. They want fulfillment. They want to be able to go to an organization every day and make an impact. And let's be honest, like how many times we talk to people in corporations, they spend their whole day in meetings, right? So
Yeah.
imagine if you took your job, you stripped out all the superfluous stuff that you don't need to be a part of. You just focused on what you did, where you could make the most impact. And then you were able to do that for 3 or 4 organizations. You get to make an impact. You're providing your expertise where it's appreciated. You're not stuck in meetings all day. There's no bureaucracy in politics because you get to keep a little bit of an arm's length relationship. I think that's really the driver on the labor force side of it. So hopefully that answered your question.
Oh yeah, that fulfillment piece makes a lot more sense now, and I can understand why that is the priority. How much time do we waste in those management discussions, which, serve a purpose, but being able to come on as a fractional, focus on the strategy, again, it's very clear. What does it look like once the engagement begins? How long does the strategy take? I know we want to dive into the target audiences and really understand how we're reaching them, what we're reaching them with, but what do the first few months look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So the primary point is that depending on the company's circumstance, I call it an assessment. You can call it whatever you want. Call it an audit, call it an upfront, whatever you want to call it. But let's call it an assessment, just so we can have some common language.
Okay.
The mileage may vary for what a fractional assessment may look like. Sometimes when you over-engineer that assessment period, you run into a lot of trouble because just like with your client base, Jason, the problems may be different. The competitors might be different. The industry, the macro, all these things may be different, and you may need more or less time in any particular area. So the way we define our assessment framework, it has 4 parts, but they're generally flexible, and a really good fractional can figure out in what ratio do I need to do them. So number one, you always start internally, right? I've got to interview the senior executives within the company. That could just be one founder, or that could be a whole team of people. It depends on the company's size, right? So understand the business. What are they trying to do? What are their pain points from the inside? And then number 2 is always talk to customers. One of the things that we'll often hear from clients is, oh yeah, you can just go talk to my salespeople and they'll tell you what customers think. And I say, red flag, stop. We have to talk directly to customers because we need an unfiltered and unbiased perspective of who the customer is, what do they care about, what is my company providing, and what are they not providing that they could be providing. Just given that transparency drives a tremendous amount of value. So the first is internal, the second is customers, the third is digital, right? We're in the digital marketing world. If you can't do an unbiased assessment of the website, of the social media handles, of where you are on Google, of all of those types of things, we have a 10-point digital assessment that we do, probably similar to what a company like yours does. And then number 4 is competition. And I always say to clients who say, oh, I don't have competition, I'll say you have direct competitors, you have indirect competitors, and you have unknown competitors, right? So quite often when you work with a company and they're trying to change somebody's behavior in a buying process, the biggest competitor is do nothing. So what am I doing instead of buying your SaaS product? Well, I'm using an Excel spreadsheet, or I'm using Google Sheets, or I'm doing this other thing. Really getting an understanding of what is happening in the marketplace from a competitive perspective. So what I say is that 4-part assessment can sometimes take 3 months. Sometimes it can be done in 30 days. It all depends on how deep you need to go and how much time from that fractional you might necessarily need. Then what we usually do is provide them that assessment. Sometimes that's enough and they're done, but usually it's not. And then you need somebody to come in and start to implement all of the recommendations that are made as a result of the assessment. The most typical arrangement is 6 months, I would say, is the most typical arrangement. Sometimes when you have a minimum engagement time of a year, it gets to be pretty restrictive because a lot of things change in small businesses over the course of a year. And then 3 months tends to be a little bit too short. So you do the assessment, and then you usually have that fractional on for about 6 months to start to implement the solutions, take control of all of the different marketing work streams. Maybe you have some employees, maybe you have some embedded agency relationships, maybe you have those types of things. At about 6 months, the company usually hits an inflection point because if the fractional is doing a fabulous job, they have worked themselves into more things to do, right? Like any good marketing person, if you create programs and they create success, there's more revenue, there's more complexity, there's more customers. So generally one of 3 things happens. Number one is that fractional goes full time, right? And
Mhm.
that's okay. Sometimes that fractional works themselves into a job, and that's wonderful. Number two, they have created a job for someone else because sometimes the fractional doesn't want a full-time job. Or we just had a situation where we put a fractional into a company and they needed somebody in the geography to take on the full-time job, but our fractional wasn't there. They were all the way across the country. That's great for a fractional, but they want somebody in their offices full-time, which is totally fine. So the fractional purposely and explicitly works themselves out of a job to go hire the full-time solution internally. And then option three is that they just stay on as a fractional, right? Everything is going great. I can still manage this for 1 day a week, 1 to 2 days a week. And then I will continue to manage, but start to build a team internally. So those are the three most common things that happen after that first 6-month period.
I love it. I can understand the impact. So, I mean, normally what it takes to onboard an employee, get them integrated, everything that needs to occur, you're streamlining with the assessment. You're talking to the stakeholders. If it's a small team, maybe everybody, otherwise upper management. You're talking to the clients, the customers, getting their actual feedback. You're looking at the competition. You're looking at the digital aspects. You're looking at everything that you need to get a clear understanding of to roll out a strategy. And then you're starting to put all the different pieces into play, look to hit that foundation and the goals associated with it in about 6 months, and either continue, bring on a new CMO, or even go in full time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. That's right.
Now, where do you see this fall apart? Where do you see this really explode in a positive direction? Is
Yeah.
it when founders are not embracing everything about the strategy or go back to their old habits? Is it when fractional CMOs are not asking the right questions? What's needed to make this successful?
I will tell you the number one failure point, and I'm going to say this jokingly, but it's totally serious. Any 25-year-old kid with a Mac can call themselves a fractional CMO. So the failure point
Sure.
is when you buy a fractional CMO that's not actually a good qualified fractional CMO.
Mhm.
And that's no slight to any individual. It just means that the vetting process that a company goes through wasn't rigorous enough to make sure that they meet the right criteria, right? So we face this in the agency business as well. Anybody can be an agency. There's no barrier to entry. You can just go get Google Ads certified and call yourself a marketing agency. And then they go up against a company like yours who's really qualified, super experienced, drives great impact. It's the same disparity, right? So the number one piece of advice I would give to a business who's considering working with any fractional executive is vet them exactly the same way you would vet a full-time employee,
Mhm.
right? Because the impact may not be as great because you're not taking them on as a full-time W-2, but the damage that they can do or the opportunity cost of time can still be pretty great. Really go into it eyes wide open. Am I vetting the person right for culture? Do they have the right type of experience? Have they been in the right industry and that type of thing? We have a pretty high bar for everybody in our community. So you can be pretty assured that everybody that comes in has a good criteria. But most companies aren't talking to companies like us, right? They're talking just to anybody who says that they're a fractional CMO. So I would say that's the number one failure point that I would recommend against.
And I have seen those CMO marketing experts on LinkedIn and everywhere, and you look at their experience, and it's pretty thin. I've also seen some of the top CMOs undermarket that themselves. So going through that vetting process, going into detail. I like how you talked about strategy and execution earlier, and what it means with strategy with no execution, really slow path to your goals. The
Yeah.
execution without strategy. How do you find the right balance to that? Do you have a program where, hey, monthly, this is what we want to put into strategy, or annually? How do you find the right harmony between strategy and execution?
Yeah, I would say it's like a pendulum. And if you swing that pendulum too far to one side, you're going to fail, right?
Yeah.
Because you're a business owner and I'm a business owner. If somebody
Yeah.
came to me and wanted to spend 3 to 6 months on strategy and I saw nothing in the marketplace, I wouldn't hire them, right? So I would never expect one of my fractionals to go out there with a slow to build strategy. On the other hand, you can't obviously go right out of the gates and do a bunch of execution because that's going to fail. We already talked about that, right? So I think early on in any particular engagement, you've got to have enough confidence that you're building the right strategy. It's validated. And then you've got to be able to test and learn quickly. It's like the title of your podcast, right? You can take that as an analogy for a fractional CMO. Is once you have some basis to work from, you better be out there testing, learning, measuring like crazy. So we encourage all of our clients and all of their fractionals to have extremely clear metrics on what does success look like. Is it a B2B business that needs new leads? Is it an e-commerce business that needs new revenue that they weren't getting before? Whatever those end metrics are, keep those in front of you and then continually update the strategy as needed. And then slowly the pendulum goes to more and more focus on execution. Are you running the right campaigns? Are they across the right platforms? Then all of a sudden it becomes a very much a digital marketing challenge, right? Like, because so many of the things are digital. So I would say those are the tips I would give is start heavy on the strategy side. And as you move over to the execution side, remember that the mistakes you might have made in strategy still need some warranting. So you never want that gauge to go to zero, but you still want to keep some level of focus in both areas.
Absolutely. And like you said, pendulum, you have to go back and forth. The competitor marketing audit, how often are you doing it? Are you, getting email alerts, following them on social? Sure. But how often are you formally analyzing what other groups are doing in the space? Are you applying that to your conversations with your product guys and everything going on the operational side? So making it that circle, I really like the pendulum analogy.
Yeah, I would also submit, Jason, based on what you just said, like running on a program, it doesn't have to be EOS, the entrepreneur operating system. I run my business on EOS, and a lot of our clients, I think about 35% of our clients run on EOS. That builds a process naturally to look at your strategy every quarter. So even if you don't run on EOS, a marketing department should every quarter take a pause, understand where you are against your strategy, against your metrics, and then use that opportunity to reset 4 times a year. And then once every year, you do an annual planning session where you might just look at you might not just look at the whole year, but you might actually look 3 to 5 years out. Because you hit on something that's really worth mentioning. Quite often we'll have a fractional CMO come into a high change environment. And if you're not updating the way you look at your strategy based on new competitors, based on new macroeconomic factors, based on new technology, you're going to be behind because your strategy might be stale. So I find that updating that every quarter is important, but then taking that annual look is also really important.
Sure, sure. And whatever the reporting structure that fractional CMO puts into play in general, we work off weekly reporting. So if we see a dip in analytics for advertising or for content engagement and for anything occurring with outreach, we want to be able to address that, test, optimize, scale. So being able to block out a period of time quarterly to really go into further depth there, I like that duration. Does this work better for groups in specific industries or companies of given sizes? Have you seen it deliver for everything from startup to mid-market to Fortune 500? Can you speak to the right fit for organizations, if any?
Yeah, I would say probably not for enterprise and Fortune 500. Those size companies, when you're in the billions or you're in the Fortune 500, they usually already have a chief marketing officer. And if they don't, it's probably a full-time hire, right? So when you're dealing with startups, yeah, fractional CMOs may be awesome. In the lower middle market, which is where we focus, they're a great fit. It is really surprising, or it's not really surprising anymore. It was surprising that you can get to 20 million, 25 million, 50 million, or 100 million in revenue with no real marketing leadership. Like, that's amazing to me. But having that leadership can drive tremendous value. And then when you go into the sort of the meaty part of the middle market, when you get a marketing leader that's in transition, or maybe somebody didn't work out and you need to plug a hole, or maybe you have a new growth initiative in a new geography, a new technology, or something like that, a fractional CMO can be somebody who really focuses on those types of initiatives. So generally, just to recap, I think it's best for companies that are like middle market or lower, but I've seen some examples where they can fit in enterprise or higher.
And full spectrum of industries.
Oh yeah, from an industry perspective, I think it's more about the mentality of the leadership team than it is about the industry. I've actually not found an industry where it won't work, because what you do is you look for a fractional with experience in that industry, and they are everywhere. I'd say the biggest surprise for me, Jason, is the humongous base of talent that's out there with experience that are not necessarily looking for full-time jobs. So you can almost name an industry, and I can give you a fractional CMO that has sort of been there and done that. That's what I think. That's what the most amazing part of the whole thing is.
It's so educating for me to learn about. I've been brought in as a consultant to serve as those roles. We sell against agencies that have external, outsource CMO type line items, and to really get a more clear vision on how this works. It's definitely giving me ideas, and I have different notes here. Given the nature of the show, test, optimize, and scale, what would you recommend towards founders, towards tests they could take towards their own growth? Whether it's putting in a fractional CMO, whether it's shifts that they can take towards their product. What are some tests that you would encourage listeners to incorporate into their own tactics for Q2 of 2024 here?
I would say that the number one thing that pops in my mind is how my own business has evolved over the years. It really is a microcosm of test, optimize, and scale. So we started off like a pretty good digital marketing agency, right? We were pretty successful. We drove some amazing results. And as we saw things in the macro and competitive fields in our own business change, like as you know, Jason, the agency business is uber competitive, right? So you're constantly looking for the areas where your team can over deliver and it's less competitive. So, and obviously you have to be able to run a business, so there has to be profit pools there and all of those types of things. That's a microcosm of what we're talking about. So we went into those businesses, the pandemic hit, it forced us to reshift how we operate, what industries we focus on. We did that for a couple of years. We pivoted again, because again, what did we find in our own business? We found that the most value that we drove for our clients and the biggest competitive differentiation was really solidifying the strategy that we're bringing to our clients. We let the bits and bytes, right? No offense to the digital marketing focused people. They do a really good job. We found it harder to compete on, oh, I want to be your best Google ads expert. I want to be the best person that does LinkedIn ads or Facebook ads or SEO or email marketing. Like, each of those individually, we couldn't be the very best, but what we could be the best at was saying, here's the entire marketing department perspective, and we'll help you pick the right tactics. And you lean into that and you test different ideas, and you test the idea of having an external chief marketing officer come in and work with one of your clients. And then you test another idea and you test this and you test that. You measure like crazy. You optimize the ones that are working, you dump the ones that aren't working, and then you scale against it. That's exactly what we did with our business, right? So we started off testing a couple of fractional CMOs to see how that would work. That was barely a rounding error in our P&L. And now, as I said earlier, it's 2/3 of our business, right? So really driving through and building processes where you can scale those once they're effective. I'd say that's an appropriate lesson for any business owner out there that says, oh, I've got a lot of things changing. I've got a really competitive field. We're really good at some things. We're not so great at others. Said slightly differently, one of the biggest mistakes we made early in our business is we thought that just being good enough in certain areas was okay. It's actually not. You never want to be just good enough, because that makes you extremely replaceable. And you've got to go to the areas where your customers are telling you, oh my God, you're the best at this. I can't live without you. That'll give you the areas where you really want to focus. So that would be probably the best answer I have for that.
In a competitive landscape, you have to be the best. Like you mentioned, SEO, PR, all these other tactics. Yeah, we could do them, but we could be the best here. Why don't we build the business around that? The data showing us what's working. Let's do more of what the customers, what the clients want.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
What about towards optimization? You figure out what you're the best at, you start to productize around it, and the results aren't quite there yet. Maybe you need more marketing. Maybe you need to change up the marketing itself. Maybe there's more operational factors that need to be massaged. What are the approaches towards optimization that you would recommend towards listeners, towards viewers?
Yeah, I would say double down on building repeatable processes that are not dependent on an individual. And that took a long time for me to learn that lesson as a business owner, because you can't scale past a person if everything relies on a person. Sometimes that's a business owner. Sometimes that's a brilliant copywriter or digital ads person or SEO person. So you've got to be able to build processes that allow you to optimize how things work independent of people. that lesson took me forever to learn, Jason. If I could wave a magic wand and go back 5 years and learn that lesson over again, I'd be a lot more successful than I am today, I would say.
That's a very humble and very strong recommendation to provide. I have fallen into the same types of errors, and it's tough. You find someone who's great, you want to be able to utilize them and bring in the best performance for any given client, any given campaign, let alone the white glove service accounts that have larger initiatives. But it bottlenecks things. It slows down production. It can affect quality over time, and it's simply not scalable. What about scale itself? Any tips, any examples from your own growth that you could point towards for others to act on for their own
Yeah.
2024 and later achievements?
Yeah, the first thing that pops in my mind, and again, pretty strong advice that I would have to people, once you find the winners, start saying no to everything else. And boy, for an ADHD entrepreneur like myself, it is really hard to say no to things that you previously have loved doing, right? So consciously saying no to everything else allows you to say, in the 4-hour work week, what did they learn decades ago, right? Like, if you can only optimize the things that you're awesome at that only require you, there's only about 4 hours of work to be done. Well, people like us will fill in the gaps with stuff that's not necessarily necessary, right? So once you've figured out what the things are, what are the things you're now going to say no to? So for us in our business, that we still have execution clients. We love those execution or agency types of clients, but we have been much more restrictive about the clients that we're going to let in the door, because that doesn't allow us to focus on the growth of the business, which is fractional CMO. So I would say to any other business owner out there are the things that you're saying yes to that are suboptimal impeding you from growing in the areas that are much more optimized, right? And so when you want to scale a business, focus on the areas that you said earlier that are of the unique value that you provide and you can be the absolute best at. Sometimes it takes a little bit of self-reflection and humility to admit that you're not the best at certain things. And I would say that's where the real growth and the real power is for the business.
Find the winners where you're able to build a relationship and be the best partner for them and only work with them. Start pushing everything else away.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
Easier said than done, I may add.
Easier said than done. Anybody who says that it's easy to do hasn't actually ever done it.
It's tough when those emails are coming in, the site inquiries, the phone calls, and understanding, hey, we need to be patient. We know what we're good at, where we could be of the most value, and where our strategy is taking us. So let's just keep the focus there.
Absolutely.
Awesome, Raj. Well, I've taken a full page of notes here. Going to be sharing with my team, and haven't had any fractional CMO experts on the podcast before. It's a world that is frankly new to me. I've had my own guesses of what it looks like. I've been able to fill in a lot of the blanks, and would definitely encourage listeners and viewers to get in contact with you to get a better understanding of what being a fractional CMO or hiring a fractional CMO could consist of. It does sound like the perfect answer to this post-pandemic world, giving fulfillment, giving flexibility, bringing in the top minds into your marketing model, your business, and its goals. So I would definitely encourage the audience to get in touch. What would be the best ways for them to learn more about end marketing? And what are some thoughts that you want to leave everyone with today?
No, it's great. Well, a talent like yourself would be amazing in our group, Jason. So I'm going to make my soft pitch to have you join our group, because you would be awesome at it, right? You've done the job, you've done the thing. I encourage you to test that within your own business, right? You say you go up against that sometimes. You have the capabilities to do it. You've got the years, you understand what you're doing to run the department. What I would probably leave the group with is, there's a lot of talk about this fractional executive thing that's out there, and encouraging people on both sides of the table to try it out, just like I just encourage you to do. I think there's really no cost in doing that. It's like I call it a career MVP, right? Previously, a decade ago, careers were sort of this like linear path to the top where the next step was sort of defined. I don't think that's true anymore. I think taking a career MVP where you try something a little bit different, you pivot around with it, It may not be so linear. I think that's okay now. And I think I encourage people, even at later stages in their career, to try that sort of thing out. For us, we're looking for both sides of the equation. We're looking for talented marketing professionals who are interested in becoming fractional to join our group, right? We bring you vetted leads. We help you with tools and tips. We have a great Slack channel. We have a great thriving community. On the other side of the equation, for companies that want to try out a fractional CMO, you're welcome to give us a try. Happy to have a conversation about it to see whether it's a good fit for you. Our website is and-marketing.com. That's and-marketing.com. I'm all over LinkedIn if you want to look me up. Happy to befriend your listeners and other people that want to have a conversation about fractional executives.
There you go. There you go. Don't hesitate. Raj, want to thank you again for taking the time to indulge us in the world of fractional CMOs. Want to thank listeners for tuning in, and we will see everybody next time.